So Catherine, Princess of Wales, personally stood up in the middle of a white tie state banquet, walked across a room full of 150 international ambassadors, and had Queen Camillas' teenage grandson physically removed from Windsor Castle. And then, 5 days later, Kensington Palace dropped a formal memo basically saying that if you don't have a royal title, you're now officially on a zero-tolerance policy. That sequence of events is wild. But what's actually fascinating here is the timeline of how we got from a teenager sneaking drinks to a fundamental institutional shift in how the monarchy handles extended family scandals. Because when you actually look at what was said versus what happened, this wasn't a sudden overreaction. This was the breaking point of a pattern that's been running for over 25 years. Before we get into it, just a quick moment to say if you enjoy these deep dives into royal dynamics, hit subscribe to Crown Watch so you don't miss the next one. All right, let's unpack this. The new protocol that leaked this morning, May 13th, is genuinely unprecedented. It came directly from the offices of William and Catherine at Kensington Palace. And while it doesn't mention Freddie Parker Bowles by name, the timing makes it very clear what triggered it. The document essentially erases a gray area that has existed for decades. It says that any individual without a formal royal title or official duties now has to meet the exact same behavioral and security standards as senior working royals when they attend state functions. And the penalty for violating those standards is immediate and indefinite suspension from all future royal events. Not a warning. Not a quiet conversation behind closed doors. Just straight to suspension. That's a massive change from how things have traditionally worked. And to understand why it happened now, you have to look at the night of May 8th, St. Centre Court rises to its feet before she's even taken her seat. It's July 2026, Wimbledon, and as Catherine, Princess of Wales, walks into the royal box, thousands of people who came to watch tennis stop watching tennis. They're watching her. It's a small moment, over in seconds, but it captures something much larger than a sporting event. 2 years earlier, this same woman disappeared from public life almost entirely. Her face reduced to a single grainy hospital photograph and a wave of online speculation so intense it forced Kensington Palace into damage control. Now she's back in the same seat she's occupied for years, greeting fans, sitting beside tennis legends, looking, by every visible measure, like a woman who has come through something and out the other side. The question worth asking isn't just how she got here. It's what her return actually signals about the institution she's about to help run. Rewind to March 2024. Catherine appears in a pre-recorded video, seated on a bench, speaking directly to camera, and tells the public what the palace had spent weeks failing to explain. She had cancer. She was undergoing preventative chemotherapy, and she needed time away from public duties to focus on her health and her family. It was an extraordinary moment for an institution built on discretion. The royal family does not typically explain itself in intimate, first-person video messages. But the rumor mill by that point had grown so loud, so uncontrollable, that silence had become more damaging than disclosure. Catherine chose to speak, and in doing so, she set a tone that would define the next 2 years of her public life. Transparency over mystique, even when transparency was painful. What followed was a slow, carefully managed re-entry. She appeared at Trooping the Color in June 2024, her first public engagement since the diagnosis, and told well-wishers she was having, in her words, good days and bad days. It wasn't a polished soundbite. It was an honest admission from someone still mid-treatment, still uncertain the outcome, standing in public anyway because the institution needed her to. Catherine confirmed she would attend Trooping the Color in London as she made good progress with her cancer treatment. And that single, modest appearance told the public more than any palace statement could have. She wasn't hiding. She also wasn't pretending everything was normal. By September 2024, she announced she had completed her course of chemotherapy, a milestone that shifted the national conversation from anxious speculation to cautious hope. And then in January 2025, came the update the country had been waiting for: remission. Catherine celebrated her birthday hoping to turn the page on a turbulent year that had seen her retreat from public life to fight cancer, with expectations that she would step up her royal engagements once her chemotherapy was complete. That's the clinical version of the story. The human version is a woman in her early 40s, mother of 3 young children, stepping back into one of the most scrutinized public roles on earth after facing a disease that kills or permanently alters far more people than it spares. What's happened since is where the story becomes less about illness and more about institutional strategy. Because Catherine hasn't simply resumed her old duties. She's been positioned, deliberately and visibly, as something closer to the emotional center of gravity for the entire monarchy. Reports indicate that after entering remission, Princess Catherine was expected to increase her number of royal public engagements through 2026, a marked shift from the reduced schedule she kept during treatment, when she ranked far behind figures like King Charles and Prince William in total public appearances. The numbers tell their own story about how carefully her comeback has been calibrated. In 2025, King Charles led the family with well over 500 public appearances, while Catherine, still easing back into the role, ranked far lower. That gap was never framed by the palace as failure. It was framed as recovery, and recovery, everyone understood, takes as long as it takes. By 2026, the calibration started shifting. Royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams, speaking to reporters earlier this year, described Catherine as increasingly central to the family's operations, pointing to her popularity, her influence on fashion and public taste, and her growing confidence in stepping back into formal duties. He wasn't alone in that assessment. Across British media, the framing of Catherine's 2025 and 2026 engagements has consistently emphasized one theme. She isn't just returning to work. She's returning as a more essential figure than she was before her diagnosis. There's something almost paradoxical in that. An illness that could have permanently sidelined her instead appears to have reinforced how much the institution depends on her. Consider November 2025, when Catherine delivered her first public speech in over 2 years at the Future Workforce Summit in London. A speech is a small thing on paper. In practice, it was a signal. Chemotherapy leaves most patients fatigued for months after treatment ends, and public speaking, with its demands on memory, composure, and stamina, is not something people typically rush back into. That Catherine chose this moment to break a 2-year silence from the podium suggests a woman testing her own limits carefully and finding them wider than expected. Then there's the smaller, quieter moments, the ones that don't make headline news, but reveal something about who she is when the cameras aren't hunting for a comeback. Narrative. During a visit to Scotland's National Curling Academy, Catherine and Prince William tried their hand at the sport alongside Olympic silver medalist Bruce Mouat, and his mixed doubles partner Jen Dodds. Mouat later told reporters he'd been starstruck, describing the couple as walking like two normal people, shaking hands, chatting, wishing the athletes good luck. It's a minor anecdote in the grand scheme of a royal comeback, but it captures something the bigger set-piece events don't. A woman relearning how to simply be present in ordinary rooms with ordinary people after 2 years spent almost entirely behind closed doors. Her visits to hospitals tell a more pointed story still. As patron of Evelina London Children's Hospital since 2018, Catherine has continued making solo visits there even as her broader schedule expanded, spending time with young patients who are navigating illnesses of their own. During one such visit, a 10-year-old patient asked her, with the plain honesty only children manage, whether she was a queen. She corrected him gently, explaining she was a princess of Wales, and told him she was moved to meet children as brave as him. It's a small exchange, but it's hard not to read it against the backdrop of her own diagnosis. A woman who spent much of the previous 2 years as a patient herself, now standing in a children's hospital, meeting kids fighting battles she understands more intimately than most people in her position ever will. All of this converges at Wimbledon, which has become something like an annual measuring stick for Catherine's public recovery. In 2024, her appearance on the tournament's final day, accompanied by her daughter Charlotte and her sister Pippa, was treated as a major milestone, one of her first substantial public outings after completing treatment. By 2025 and into 2026, those appearances have become expected again, not remarkable in themselves, which is its own kind of remarkable. She sat with tennis great Andy Murray. She was joined by her children. She greeted fans along the grounds without the visible caution that marked her earliest post-treatment outings. The standing ovation she received at Centre Court wasn't just applause for a royal arriving at a tennis match. It was recognition from an ordinary British public of a 2-year journey that played out largely in public view, complete with all the fear, uncertainty, and eventual relief that implies. What makes the story worth telling isn't simply that a public figure survived cancer and returned to work, though that alone would be significant. It's what her illness revealed about the institution she represents. For decades, the royal family has operated on a doctrine-controlled disclosure, revealing only what serves the image of stability and continuity. Catherine's diagnosis broke that pattern, not because she chose radical openness for its own sake, but because the alternative, sustained silence in the face of overwhelming public speculation, had become untenable. Her video statement in March 2024 wasn't just personal honesty. It was a recalibration of how much the monarchy can reasonably ask the public to simply trust without explanation. 2 years later, that recalibration appears to have paid off in an unexpected currency. Public affection deepened rather than diminished. Catherine's approval ratings, her visibility, and her described importance to the institution have all trended upward since her diagnosis, not despite the disclosure, but arguably because of it. People responded to her honesty about good days and bad days more powerfully than they ever responded to the polished, image-managed royal appearances of decades past. In an institution often accused of hiding behind ceremony, Catherine's illness forced a version of vulnerability the public hadn't seen from a future queen before, and the public, it turns out, wanted more of it, not less. There's no guarantee this moment lasts. Illness has a way of returning, and public memory has a way of moving on to the next story before this one is finished. But for now, the trajectory is clear. A woman who 2 years ago vanished from public view amid feverish tabloid speculation has reemerged, not just recovered, but repositioned, standing closer to the center of an institution that will one day be hers to help lead. Whatever comes next for the British monarchy, it seems increasingly likely that Catherine